Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Rules of Engagement Talking Tactics. So we're on the 5th Rules of Engagement episode, the second episode of Talking Tactics. We're about to start a segment of how to do a macro build featuring Flash, the best macro player of all time. But right before we get into that, let me remind you guys to not only check out our full broadcast schedule at www.majorleaguegaming.com/schedule, but also to stay tuned for the Tournament Champions, which will be broadcasting at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then also, last thing to remind you guys, please send me your email me your replays. You have replays at home, you want to have them featured on this show, go to majorleaguegaming.com/replays. Fill out a little bit of a form there, send them over to me, and we might throw them up on Thursday's episode. And of course, ask me any questions you want on Twitter at ISAxLab. We'll get to those at the end of the show. But let's jump into Flash versus Crank, how to execute a macro build by the macro master himself, Flash. So first, we're going to talk about the setup of the game. Then we're going to talk about Flash's build. And then we're going to talk about how map control is important in the mid-game, regardless of what build you're doing, but especially with macro builds. And then we're talking about how he handles the engagement that follows up from doing the macro build. So we're going to jump into the game here, and we're going to start at the 5-minute mark, and we're going to talk about what's happened so far. So far, Flash is a 3 CC build, right? He builds a barracks early, then, of course, he gets a 1 command center, then he gets a 2nd command center. So that seems really greedy to a lot of people, but the key element here is that he builds both command centers on the high ground, okay? I've seen him beat so many 4 gates with this build. People say, Protoss can do the cheesiest build they want. This build can hold all of them because all you have to do is hold this 1 ramp location right here. So you can just build a bunch of bunkers on the high ground, you're totally fine. The other reason why it's always great to build your command center on the high ground if you're going to be a little bit greedy like this is because the Protoss, let's look at Crank's viewpoint, he can't get up the ramp, right? He doesn't know what's going on. So for all he knows, Flash could be rushing out a Helene drop, which he loves to do. It could be Cloak Banshee. So the Protoss, if they are aggressive and the Terran opted for a more tech build, Protoss would be in big trouble because they would have nothing back home to defend. And of course, Protoss doesn't know Flash isn't going tech build, so that makes this build much, much, much safer when you construct all your command centers on the high ground. It also means you can skip your early bunker, right? Normally you need an early bunker down here. You can get a bunker route much later because the Stalkers can't harass you. As soon as you have about 4 or 5 Marines, the Stalkers can't harass you on your ramp anymore because they don't get vision of the Marines until they get into range of the Marines. They can't do that hit and run little thing you've seen probably a lot of the pro gamers as a Protoss level use. So that's where he's at right now in the game. It's very, very macro focused, but if you analyze it, it's not actually greedy. Greedy implies you're doing something that you shouldn't be able to get away with, right? You're taking a little bit of a reach too far. At least that's what it means in StarCraft terms. In computer science algorithm or game theory terms, it actually means something totally different, which is probably more accurate to what it should mean in StarCraft terms. But there's a connotation with greed in StarCraft that it's you're taking a risk, so to say, and I don't think Flash is doing that at all with this build. The next thing he's going to do, that's really important, is he sends in that scout, right? So right here, this SCV comes in here just to see if there's units at home. If there's no units at home, he's like, oh, maybe there's a pylon down here. There's a Zealot coming there being annoying. Maybe there's a pylon down here massing a lot of units, and that's why they're not at home. So there's something to keep an eye out on. Of course, a little bit of a Zealot scout being annoying, but nothing big there. The next part of his build comes into play, where he's not being as risky as he could be because he could be getting double engineering bays right now and just getting a really jump start on those upgrades. Instead, he's going to go for the factory first, right? So he's getting stim pack and he's getting the factory first. And these are both more important against Colossus timings. You got to get those Vikings out faster. And of course, stim helps as well for early engagements, but delaying the upgrades is just a little bit of a smart thing to make sure you're less risky. So once he gets those on the way, then around the 8-minute mark, basically as soon as he's starting his starport, there's those 2 engineering bays going down. Where's he going to put them? That's an excellent question. He's going to put them, looks like back of his natural. Oops, excuse me. Back of the natural right here. So that's a good spot to put him. And now the next step is he's thinking, okay, my opponent hasn't moved out on the map yet, right? And now I have 2 medevacs. And as soon as he has 2 medevacs, as long as he's fairly confident his opponent didn't do some like 7-gate Blinkstalker build, which he is because his opponent would be out attacking him by now, or his opponent would be doing an inefficient build if they're not out by now, in which case he could afford to lose these Marines in a port trade and it wouldn't be the end of the world. So he's moving out here because he knows this is the map control part, right? He knows his opponent is not doing an all-in because they haven't moved out yet. And so if they're not doing an all-in, then they're going to be investing in a lot of technology. And if both players invest in technology, right, like we can see Flash is investing in all these upgrades, double engineering base, he teched air, he had an armory, and then of course Crank's doing the same way, double engineering base and Colossi. If both people tech up, Flash should be the one who actually can take the map control because he has the faster units and they're stronger in smaller engagements. So as far as map control goes, if you're doing a macro focused build, you have to be careful to scout for all-ins. Nice little harass there by Crank. You have to be careful to scout for all-ins, but at the same time, if you're not all-inning you should take map control. Like, if you can, just go for it and try to take it. And all you have to do is, if you're not all-inning, you should have map control. That's a very, very important concept, because then your opponent has to be worried about you maybe throwing a giant attack on them. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about, we're going to fast forward just a little bit more to get into the engagement. So this is how the build's set up. And the build's set up, he's macroing really, really strong. And he's playing against a pretty cookie-cutter Protoss build, heavily upgraded Colossi, which is something you'll probably run into a ton on the ladder as you play Terran vs. Protoss. And one thing to note is if you're macroing well, regardless of what build you do, if Protoss is focusing on upgrades as much, if not more than you are, you should always be at least 20 to 30 foot ahead. Of course, Flash being Flash is going to be about 40 foot ahead. But you should always be at least 20 to 30 foot ahead of your Protoss opponent if you're doing a very macro-focused build. So now, he's going to look for the engagement. And the reason why is because he has 2-2 now. It recently finished just shortly a bit ago. He scanned his opponent. He knows there's no Templar. And he knows his opponent is ahead of him in upgrades. So right now, they're both going to be 2-2. He doesn't know Crank's only getting the armor upgrade, but the longer he waits, Crank might get 3-3, and then all of a sudden, Crank will have the advantage. And the other reason why he's attacking now is because he's maxed. He knows his opponent's not maxed because he's tearing his opponent's Protoss and he's been macroing flawlessly, so he's going to hit max before his opponent. The longer he waits, the more army Crank will get, whereas Flash is stuck, right? He can't get in it any more than 200 food. So right now is the perfect time to attack, so we're going to talk about different engagements he can do. So he's going to come in here, and this is all about the timing of the attack watch at this point. Now we're going to talk about the positioning, right? So he knows exactly the type of army that Crank has. Crank has these Colossi, these Zealots, etc. There's a lot of good spots for Vikings here. And there's two options. One is you can go for a giant concave, but Flash is going to choose the other option, right? He's going to come in and just try to focus on a small dot here, and then watch what he's going to do. Actually, you know what? Let's bring this up on the touchscreen really quickly here. Let me bring up this pen software. So on the touchscreen, you can see, let's just draw a little bit of a circle of where his opponent's army is, right? So right now, his opponent's army is covering this ground, right? And his opponent has what looks like a great concave, right? Because Flash is in this tiny area up here. So his opponent has a nice little area here. He's kind of stuck up in this area there. But it looks bad right now, but if we're going to fast forward a little bit, if Flash backs away, right? The Protoss army is going to chase him, and it feels kind of obliged to chase him because the Vikings are picking at the Colossi, and if he doesn't chase him, then the Vikings can continue to pick at the Colossi. And of course, as they both run in, shoot a volley, and run out, the entire Terran army can shoot that volley, whereas the bulk of the Protoss army is all these Zealots, which are kind of, some of them are in front, some are a little bit behind, but they of course, they can't engage without chasing a little bit. So the Protoss army feels like it has to chase, and if it chases, because of the way this corner is, all of a sudden, instead of having this block, it's going to come into a block that's going to look like this, right? It's going to be in this surface right here. And all of a sudden there, you've got Flash can engage these units here and kind of cross them out. And these guys are wondering right here, what the hell are we doing? We're stuck in the back. We can't actually engage it all. So let's see if he uses this micro technique. We're going to keep that up on the touchscreen, but we're going to fast forward a tiny bit in the game. And we're going to see if it actually matches that same segment. So right here, if we bring up that touchscreen, we can see that Protoss is actually now kind of hitting almost that same angle. And all these Immortals and Zealots over here, they have big question marks because they have no idea who they're supposed to shoot. So if we jump back in the game and see how this can carry out, as Flash backs away, he engages these Zealots here. A lot of the rest of the army is stuck down here. Of course, he kind of abandoned his Vikings, but he got most of the Colossi. And then from here on out, now instead of being 40 foot ahead, he's also in 50 foot ahead. And he can just continue to engage at pretty much his own will. Backing away, notice how he's conserving his stim packs, waiting for more reinforcements. Very, very, very conservative use of stim pack, which is a key part of there. And then from this engagement, the same philosophy. You back away and their units get stuck, attacking poor targets. And now all of a sudden he's 60 food ahead. And he's going to keep compounding and compounding. He's going to come back in again. And now that he's 60 food ahead, all of a sudden he's just going to walk over his opponent in a straight-on engagement. And that'll pretty much be the game right there. The Protoss is now he's 80 food ahead. He's just going to kill a third base. It's going to be game. And that's about it. So that is how you basically do a macro build. And when we talk about bring up those couple ideas that are very important to think about when you're doing a macro build. First, you have to basically think, in this case it was Flash's build, your build needs to be as economically focused as possible. Make sure you don't die to all-ins at the same time. Then, if they're not all-in you, you want to take map control, and then finally, you have to think of when you want to engage. Think of the timing of when you want to engage, and then think of how you want to handle the engagement positionally-wise. So I hope you've enjoyed this macro build by Flash. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get into our third segment of the day.